Birth of a superpower, the formation of the Soviet Union. The Soviet Union, or the Union of Soviet Socialist Republics, USSR, was officially established on December 30th, 1922. It emerged from the ashes of the Russian Civil War, 1917 to 1922, a brutal conflict that pitted the Bolsheviks against a fragmented opposition. The Bolsheviks, led by the charismatic yet ruthless Vladimir Lenin, triumphed and reshaped the remnants of the Russian Empire into a new socialist state. The Union initially consisted of Russia, Ukraine, Belarus, and the Transcaucasian Federation, Armenia, Azerbaijan, and Georgia. The USSR was founded on Marxist-Leninist principles, promoting a centrally planned economy and an authoritarian one-party rule under the Communist Party. The Russian Revolution of 1917 had swept away the Tsarist autocracy, but the struggle for power was far from over. Mikhail Gorbachev took power in 1985 and introduced perestroika, economic restructuring, and glasnost, political openness, to revive the USSR. While these reforms aimed to modernize the country, they inadvertently unleashed suppressed nationalist movements and eroded the Communist Party's grip. The Chernobyl disaster, 1986, exposed deep flaws in the Soviet system, further eroding trust. Out of the ashes of the Russian Empire, a new entity arose, the Union of Soviet Socialist Republics, formally established in December 1922. This vast new nation, spanning across two continents, emerged from the turmoil of revolution and civil war. By 1989, Soviet satellite states began breaking away, symbolized by the fall of the Berlin Wall. In August 1991, hardline communists attempted a coup against Gorbachev, but it failed. The writing was on the wall. On December 25, 1991, Gorbachev resigned, and the Soviet Union officially ceased to exist, splitting into 15 independent republics, including Russia. It was forged from the remnants of the Russian Empire. The Bolsheviks, led by Vladimir Lenin, had emerged victorious. They were determined to reshape society along communist lines. The USSR, often referred to as the Soviet Union, was founded on the ideology of Marxism-Leninism. This ideology advocated for a socialist state led by the working class. It aimed to dismantle the capitalist system and establish a classless society. Lenin, a shrewd strategist and revolutionary leader, envisioned a centralized state. This state would control the means of production and distribution. He believed this was necessary to achieve economic equality and social justice. The formation of the Soviet Union marked a pivotal moment in world history. It signified the emergence of a new global power. This new power was openly hostile to capitalism and determined to spread its communist ideology worldwide. The early years of the Soviet Union were marked by both challenges and triumphs. The country faced economic hardship, political instability, and internal conflicts. Despite these obstacles, the Bolshevik government embarked on an ambitious program of social and economic transformation. The Soviet Union's early years were a time of radical experimentation and upheaval. The Bolsheviks implemented policies aimed at transforming the country's social and economic fabric. They nationalized industries, collectivized agriculture, and sought to eradicate religion and traditional social structures. These changes were met with resistance and often resulted in widespread social unrest. However, they also laid the foundation for the Soviet Union's emergence as a major industrial and military power. Lenin's legacy shaping the Soviet state. Vladimir Lenin, the architect of the Bolshevik Revolution, played a pivotal role in shaping the early Soviet state. Lenin recognized that war and revolution had devastated the economy. To stabilize the nation, he introduced the New Economic Policy, NEP, in 1921, a surprising compromise that temporarily allowed small businesses and private trade. It helped recover the economy, but was controversial among hardline communists. However, Lenin's health rapidly deteriorated after suffering multiple strokes. By the time he died in January 1924, a fierce power struggle had already begun within the Communist Party. The two main contenders were Joseph Stalin, a shrewd and manipulative political operator, and Leon Trotsky, an intellectual revolutionary. Through ruthless maneuvering, Stalin outmaneuvered Trotsky, who was eventually exiled and later assassinated in Mexico in 1940. His death in 1924 left a void in the Soviet leadership. This triggered a power struggle among his potential successors. Lenin's rule, though brief, had a profound impact on the course of Soviet history. Stalin transformed the USSR into a totalitarian state, tightening his grip through purges, propaganda, and terror. His five-year plans, starting in 1928, sought to turn the Soviet Union into an industrial powerhouse overnight. Cities sprouted, with factories, steel production skyrocketed, and massive infrastructure projects reshaped the landscape, but the cost was immense. Forced collectivization of agriculture led to a catastrophic famine, with the Holodomor, 1932 to 1933, in Ukraine alone, killing millions. He oversaw the implementation of key policies that laid the foundation for the Soviet system. One of Lenin's most significant contributions was the new economic policy. Introduced in 1921, the NEP represented a temporary departure from the Bolsheviks' initial radical economic policies. The late 1930s saw the infamous Great Purge, where Stalin's paranoia led him to eliminate perceived enemies, including top military officials, intellectuals, and even loyal communists. Millions were executed or sent to brutal labor camps in Siberia, known as gulags. Facing economic collapse and widespread famine, Lenin recognized the need for a more pragmatic approach. The NEP allowed for a limited degree of private enterprise and encouraged foreign investment. This helped to revive the Soviet economy after years of war and revolution. Despite his pragmatic approach to economic recovery, Lenin remained committed to the ultimate goal of building a communist society. Then came World War II. When Nazi Germany launched Operation Barbarossa in 1941, Stalin was caught off guard. The war was a nightmare, with battles like Stalingrad, 1942 to 1943, turning into hellish meat grinders. The Soviet Union lost over 26 million people, yet emerged victorious in 1945, capturing Berlin and establishing itself as a global superpower. He believed that the Soviet Union's success depended on its ability to industrialize rapidly and create a strong working class. To achieve this, he initiated a series of reforms aimed at modernizing the country's infrastructure and education system. Lenin's legacy is a complex one, marked by both achievements and contradictions. He is remembered as a ruthless revolutionary leader who was willing to use violence to achieve his goals. At the same time, he is also recognized for his pragmatism and his ability to adapt to changing circumstances. His death in 1924 ushered in a new era in Soviet history, one that would be dominated by the iron rule of Joseph Stalin. The Iron Fist Stalin's reign of terror and triumph. With victory came division. Stalin created a buffer of communist satellite states in Eastern Europe, setting the stage for a Cold War with the US, the Berlin Blockade, 1948 to 1949, and the formation of NATO, 1949, cemented the ideological divide. Stalin's final years were marked by growing suspicion and internal crackdowns until his death in 1953, which left the USSR in turmoil. Following Lenin's death in 1924, Joseph Stalin emerged as the paramount leader of the Soviet Union. Stalin's rule, spanning nearly 3 decades, was a period of unprecedented terror and repression. Nikita Khrushchev stunned the world in 1956 by denouncing Stalin's crimes in his secret speech. He promoted de-Stalinization, closed many gulags, and introduced some liberal reforms. Meanwhile, the USSR soared into the space race, launching Sputnik 1957, the first ever satellite, and sending Yuri Gagarin 1961 into space as the first human to orbit the Earth. It was also a time of remarkable transformation that saw the Soviet Union emerge as a major industrial and military power. Stalin's rise to power was marked by ruthlessness and cunning, but Khrushchev's aggressive foreign policy led to the Cuban Missile Crisis, 1962, which brought the world to the brink of nuclear war before a last-minute resolution with the US internal opposition led to his removal in 1964, paving the way for Leonid Brezhnev. He outmaneuvered his rivals within the Communist Party, consolidating his control over all aspects of Soviet society. Brezhnev's rule focused on stability and military expansion, but economic stagnation set in. Soviet troops crushed Czechoslovakia's Prague Spring 1968, reinforcing Soviet dominance in Eastern Europe. In 1979, the USSR invaded Afghanistan, triggering a costly and unwinnable war that drained resources and morale. Though the 1970s détente eased tensions with the US, the economy continued to decline, leading to rising discontent. His policies were driven by a combination of Marxist-Leninist ideology and a profound paranoia. He believed that the Soviet Union was surrounded by enemies, and that only through rapid industrialization and collectivization could it hope to survive. The collectivization of agriculture was one of the most brutal and disruptive policies of Stalin's reign. Peasant farmers were forced off their land and into collective farms. This resulted in widespread famine and social upheaval. Millions of people perished as a result of Stalin's policies. Those who resisted were labeled as enemies of the people and subjected to imprisonment, exile, or execution. Despite the human cost, Stalin's policies achieved their desired effect. The Soviet Union underwent a period of rapid industrialization, transforming itself from a largely agrarian society into a major industrial power. By the eve of World War II, the Soviet Union had become one of the world's leading producers of steel, coal, and oil. The Soviet Union's history is a dramatic saga of revolution, ambition, repression, war, and collapse. It transformed the world, rivaled the US for decades, and left an indelible mark on history. Its legacy continues to influence global politics, especially in Russia's modern geopolitical strategies. The USSR's rise and fall remain one of the most compelling stories of the 20th century, a cautionary tale of power, ideology, and the unpredictable forces of history. Thank you very much for watching this video.